Hello and welcome to the Emerald City Video Podcast. I know it's been a while, but as we walk you down this latest new release wall, your video store guys, Russ and Zach, are going to be talking to you today about the death of Superman.
Yeah, we're just about to close, so can you make your pick right now? Also, would you like some direct? Would you like direct TV with this purchase?
That's Blockbuster.
Sorry, we've been talking about Blockbuster like all day. So
yeah. It probably tomorrow or the next day we should do a special episode that just catches up on some of the madness that's been going on in the entertainment industry lately.
Yeah.
For tonight, we got to stay focused because it's already late at night.
Yep.
But the Death of Superman is yet another of these animated DC Universe features. I think the last one that Zach and I talked about was Gotham by Gaslight, which is like an alternate history Batman that takes place in the Victorian times.
Yes. This
one is a lot more straightforward. The Death of Superman is, as the name implies, about a story where Superman dies.
Yes.
If you've seen pretty much any Superman media in the last 25 years, you've probably seen some version of the Death of Superman, because it was the most popular Superman story in God knows how long, and has therefore been adapted or at least borrowed heavily from many times.
Because the one thing that the entertainment industry likes to do is when they have a successful idea is they want to beat it to death.
Exactly. So elements of this story appeared in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which we've talked about briefly here.
Yep.
Also in Superman Doomsday, which is the first, actually, of these DC Universe animated films. Superman Doomsday was a much looser adaptation. It did deal heavily with the death of Superman, but in that story, they also decided to revive him within the same movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a very different movie. And this one is notable because while there are a lot of kind of wide variances from the comics of the 90s, this is much more similar to the source material than anything else that we've seen so far.
Yeah.
And that's going to be doubled down on next year, because this is getting a sequel called Reign of the Superman, which deals with the aftermath of Superman's death and 4 people who all show up claiming to be him.
Yeah.
So don't think we really need a plot synopsis, but the basic gist of this movie is Superman is dealing with relationship struggles with Lois, while the Justice League gets a signal to go to, I don't think they tell you exactly where, but there's a crashed meteor and a monster pops out of it and wreaks some havoc in Atlantis, and then comes onto land and just tears through the Justice League until Superman finally comes to fight it. They fight for probably
he was on a date night thing, so it was very, very important.
Yeah. Although it is one of those things where they do a pretty decent job of being like, it's really fine. It's a monster. We'll go get it.
Yeah, at first, but it was like I think it's very quickly clear that it's not just another monster that's they're doing and that there's no one at the desk at Justice League going, everyone's getting their ass handed to them. Soups, whatever you're doing, you gotta get out there right now.
But then there's 20 minutes of Superman and Doomsday fighting until they both die.
Yep.
And then a little bit of denouement where we get to see kind of what happens to the world after Superman's death, and sets up the sequel. But I guess first of all, Zach, what did you think?
I liked it. I liked it more than I thought I would. The few of these type of things that I've seen, I've been kind of unimpressed. I mean, other than Gotham by Gaslight, I love that. But again, that was, so it was just a completely different thing than drawing from the comic book. I mean, one of the problems is that with any of these stories that and especially, you know, the death of Superman. I mean, it's the story that got me into comics. You know, it's the story that, you know, at the height of my liking comic books, I read, and so it's anytime that they take a story, and again, you know, I mean, this is kind of my main problem with Batman versus Batman versus Superman, which I didn't have a lot of problems with, but the one issue that I had, I'm like, why did they took this storyline and they didn't do it, you know, like I want Jurgen's story. You know, it's like I want it like it was in the comics. You know, it's like one of the very few like uber comic book fan sort of things they do, and I'm totally not like that type of person usually. But I'm just like, no, I just want it like it was. Like I have a remembrance of, and honestly, I was realizing as I'm watching this, I'm like, wait, did that happen? Like it's been so long. I'm gonna have to sit down and reread the run again because it's been. I mean, I think I read it again in the late '90s, but I don't think I've read it since then, sadly. But like I said, I liked it. I mean, it's well produced. I like the animation style, and you know, it's not cheaply done like a lot of these. Kind of like a lot of these have a feeling of doing like we're like, oh, this is a deep straight to DVD money grab sort of feel. Like this it had a style, stuck with it, and the writing was pretty good. I mean, I think that it actually with the writing, I mean, like I think there's some problems with the writings and the jokes and things like that, but it's comic book. You know, I mean, like it's not like the film like you expect in Batman versus Superman, or you expect in the Avengers. You expect a very different level of dialogue. This was extraordinarily comic book, which is something I like. But yeah, that's my short version at least.
What's really funny is that the guy who wrote the screenplay for this is Peter J. Tomasi. Pete Tomasi just recently finished a run on Superman in the comics. Yep. He was writing Superman while Dan Jurgens was writing Action Comics. And so not only did he literally must have been writing this movie while he was still writing Superman, but just the fact that he's writing the comics at the same time as Dan Jurgens, who was kind of the driving force behind the death of Superman in the comics. Obviously, Dan was one of about 10 creators who were all working together on the books at the time. Yep. But it was Dan who came into the room with the idea for I want a big physical threat, and it was Dan who came into the room with a sketch of Doomsday.
Yeah. This is pretty close, wasn't it? I mean, I mean, I could literally Google an image of Jurgens' Doomsday, but
they have the weird like under thing, which like the horn that comes from essentially like the neck area, and it's like one big one instead of a bunch of small ones, which I think is, to me, it looks like the New 52 Doomsday with those big stupid ram horns that I hate.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what they were necessarily going for. I feel like it was more just a thing of trying to simplify the animation in such a way that, you know, they could do.
Yeah, it's pretty dead on. I mean, I'm looking at Jurgens. I think this is I think this is because obviously there's different versions, but I think this is Jurgens' thing, and they have the hair, which I actually completely forgot about. Just super weird. Which I find amusing, that one scene that he actually uses the hair to pull him off the bridge, which is super fun. That's something I should say. I think the fight sequences were again with the animation style, like because it was a drawn down animation style, it wasn't like super over the top, like I mean, one of the problems is I think with a lot of animation movies now is we expect Pixar or it's like level of detail, and you're like, well, you're not getting that. You're not getting that with most of these films, and that's or it's like it's either Pixar or Rick and Morty, and there's almost no in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's like vaguely sketched drawings, probably 18 frames, whatever. But I liked the fight sequences were quite good, and usually that's one of the areas where either it's like a frame rate issue or it's the quality of just the motion is and they either dealt with that really well with the style of fighting that they did, or they just did it well in general. I mean, I don't know enough, but I must commend them on that one.
Yeah, I really liked the looking back at Superman Doomsday. It was like a whole movie of two big strong dudes just throwing uncoordinated haymakers at one another.
Yeah.
This one, in the bonus features, they have like a I think it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master who helped them. I'm assuming helped them to choreograph the fights. He had some role in the film. He's in the special features. And so I think this was not only better choreographed and better animated than you're used to seeing with this, but I feel like as much as I felt like the Doomsday fight in BVS could have been better, it definitely, one, was very good in terms of a live action fight against a CG monster.
Yeah.
And B, clearly the movie influenced big chunks of this, arguably as much as the comics did. I think it's really interesting to look at some of those choices that Tomasi made. Particularly the giant spear thing that Doomsday grows out of his arm at the end that we don't see him kill Superman with here like we did in the movie, but after they both collapse to the ground, that spear thing is all covered in blood. So I think the implication is that
there's a shot of Superman on top of Doomsday, and his cape clearly has a at least that's the way I read it, has like the spear through his body.
Okay.
So it's very it's just implied that it pierced Superman.
Right.
At least that's what I remember seeing, because I remember specifically looking. I mean, like, oh shit, did they actually do basically the same thing, with the same way? Because once I saw him growing that out, and I'm like, oh shit, that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And then a couple shots later, then Superman is implied dead and or dying, and the cape has a tent shape behind him.
and just in general, I mean, you didn't get the same level of brutality in that shot that you did in BVS, but like anybody who's watching this with kids, most of these DC animated things, they're PG-13 for like language and for the fact that people punch each other.
Yeah.
There is a lot of blood in this one.
Yeah.
One of the things that happened in the comics is that Doomsday like pounds his way out of the ground and gets up to Earth. And one of the very first things we see is he basically like stands completely still and holds his hand out, and a bird lands in his hand and he crushes it.
Yeah.
And you don't get that scene in this, but you get variations on that scene a bunch of times where he like squishes something's head.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he also killed just a ton of random people. Like the camping scene was pretty like implied brutal, and then also very like blood splatter brutal. I think that was the bear's blood, or at least it was implied that it was the bear's blood.
Yeah, I think so.
Like there's like a young woman who was just drenched in blood, and then
and then we don't see her die on camera, but very clearly she did.
Yeah, which is I did like how they dealt with, because I mean, one thing I hate with most of these films, and actually it's one of the reasons I like, I know there's a lot of complaints about it. It's like, oh, they brought Doomsday out to this island, and and there was no one around. Like, as much as I don't like the fact that basically it's kind of an excuse to not have random casualties, which would happen in a battle like this in a city. But it's also, I think they only did it once. I'm trying to remember another scene, but the fucking idiot kid on the bridge, who goes to get his Game
Boy,
Nintendo, whatever Game Boy thing, and Soups has to save him, and obviously like ends up having to like it kind of fucked up his his fight sequence to have to do that again. And it's like every time one of those things happen in a movie, you're like, like I know Superman has to save everybody, but like so often it ends up being the reason that, you know, the guy gets the punch in or whatever, and you're like, you could have saved 10,000 people as opposed to, you know, the next time, the next fight sequence, literally that guy goes through a building and you're like, oh, well, 4,000 people died in that building collapsing, but don't worry, you saved that little boy.
Yeah, I feel like,
which I know they have to. It's Superman, you know, but it's just like, it's always like, oh God.
It's funny. I had a note about that kid because I think that the kid is a riff on Mitch Anderson, I think his name is. There's in the Death of Superman comics, there's this like douchey teenager who likes extreme anti-heroes and who idolizes Guy Gardner. And at one point, Superman has to save his family. And it's literally one of those things where Doomsday like plows through this housing complex. And as Superman is flying to try and catch up to Doomsday, and he's got a hand just next to his ankle, he has to go back and save this like idiot kid's family.
Yeah.
So I took the kid on the bridge to be a version of that like beat.
Yeah.
Where you don't have to spend time developing Mitch, and you don't have to, because like one of the things is that they didn't, within the context of like the world they've been building with these animated movies, they've never introduced GBS, which is like the television network that's partnered with the Daily Planet.
Yeah.
And that kid's whole introduction is wrapped up in Cat Grant, which is the black reporter who's friends with Lois in this movie.
Yeah.
Having her own TV show where she interviews Superman and blah, 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 blah. So I get exactly what you're talking about. I think that they were trying to approximate a beat from the comics there.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure that's what they were doing, but I kind of feel like it. Yeah.
Sorry. The moment you brought up the TV thing, I'm just like, I only have like a handful of notes on this because, you know, but like a handful of it, like literally the last note I make is worst videographer ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because literally it was like one of this last scenes in the movie, he's looking up and he's like, like, and he talks and he's holding his video camera. He's clearly recording. I'm like, God damn it. You don't talk.
Yeah.
I mean, also, I mean, just the number of times that she like, oh, let's run after this massive battle, because I'm like, this is clearly, by the time you get halfway through this film, I think that even Lois Lane, as stupid as so many times that she's portrayed as being interacting with Superman and, you know, getting the story or whatever, which annoys me because it's like she's supposed to be an experienced reporter and they treat her, you know, like an idiot.
Yeah.
But is the number of times that she like runs after and runs directly up to the hole where Doomsday and Superman are, that is like glowing red, and you're like, that's a really bad idea. Like, I know that it's your, you know, whatever person you care about, and oh yeah, she knows, you know, but that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Like, you're a smart person. Your intelligence doesn't drop away because you're a reporter. You want to get a shot.
I'm hit or miss on the characterization of both Lois and Clark in this one. Not Clark as Superman. I think that Clark as Superman is right on point, and I think Jerry O'Connell is pretty much perfect. And actually, I really like the casting of Rebecca Romijn as Lois. Yep. My problem with Lois is just that they give her this whole thing where in the first chunk of it, because they didn't really have time to establish what the status quo of the relationship is. Yeah. So her thing about like, well, you better tell me all your secrets before I leave you because you're withholding too much, feels naggy, and I don't think it's meant to.
Yeah.
But similarly, Clark's kind of wishy-washy approach to that whole thing, and the fact that, you know, because he does not contest her point when she says, well, this feels like lack of commitment.
Yeah.
It means like implicitly it seems like he's agreeing with her.
He also, I mean, the way that they portray him as being completely and totally ignorant to how women are. I mean, unless Superman is not, or Clark Kent is not, he's awkward and maybe, you know, whatever, you know, because obviously he's he's fucking Superman. But I've never seen him as, I don't know how to act around women, like nerdy, like, which is how they seem to kind of portray him a little bit in this. Especially considering, the dinner with his parents are like, oh, your girlfriend there, and your girlfriend your girlfriend there, and like, or that was that girl or whatever. And I go, and I'm just like, because I mean, it's like Superman, he's probably been an outcast to some level, but he's not there's no portrayal of Superman that I know of where he's an unattractive human being. And so it's like, he may be awkward around women to a certain extent because he's, an alien. He doesn't know, there's so many things, but he also grew up a human in high school where women probably fawned on him to some level just because, I mean, at least in the, different versions, he's either a football I mean, he's a sports, he has talents and abilities that other people don't. And thus those are the things that makes one popular in high school. It's not like, he has like a third leg or something like that gives him that's not his special power. It's not like, oh, if I get a little too a little horny or something, I light on fire or I touch the person and they die, like certain other characters. So but that just seemed like it was like a little too much. Like if they toned it down by 20%, it would have been like, okay, yeah, awkwardness, but not not the full extent there. But
it's funny because, of course, the like one of the things that they did in this movie that they usually don't do in these movies, or at least not in the ones that I've watched, is there was just a fuck ton of Easter eggs.
Yeah, and I could see that. Yeah, I didn't know what most of them were, but I could see a lot. Yeah, that's something. Most
of them I thought were really fun. Some of them felt like, okay, you didn't need to stop the story for that. Yeah. The scene you're talking about where his parents are talking about like his ex-girlfriends.
Yeah.
Lori, the girl on the swim team who they brought up, is Lori Lamaris, who is a mermaid.
Yeah.
Because Silver Age comics.
Yeah.
The LexCorp sub that goes down to Atlantis to see the what turns out to be Doomsday, the meteorite. Mm-hmm. Is captained by a guy called Hazelwood, which is, I assume, a reference to Doug Hazelwood, who was the inker on Adventures of Superman during this time.
Oh, nice.
Let me think what else. Carlin Heights is the housing development that that Doomsday slams through at one point. Carlin being Mike Carlin, the guy who was the group editor of the DC or of the Superman books at this time. And who also, by the way, is now an executive producer who works on these DC animated movies.
Well, then probably means something.
Yeah.
Unless it's a George Carlin reference, then something.
Yeah.
But
there's also, like, my favorite, because it's so incredibly subtle and random, the scene where he goes to talk to his parents and expresses, like, his fears and his anxieties. He's wearing jeans and a tight black t-shirt.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a callback to John Byrne's Man of Steel miniseries.
Oh, yeah.
Where after the first time he has to use his powers in public, he saves this like plane that Lois is on.
Yeah.
And he gets down on the ground and everybody's like running up to him and everybody is trying to like get his attention, get him to do something for them, whatever.
Yeah.
And there's like this famous scene that used to get reprinted fairly often where he goes home dressed in that outfit and like essentially sits on the bed in the guest room and cries to his dad, like, I don't know what to do. They all wanted a piece of me. I can't live like this, which is how the Superman identity is created.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that they do in here in terms of those dopey little Easter eggs are fun. I do agree with you that like, because of the wonky characterization of Clark, like civilian Clark, the thing with the girlfriends is a miscalculation because it's like it just continues the thread of like civilian Clark being not what he needs to be for the story.
I found the scene where I don't know. Are we doing? I don't know if what qualifies as spoilers or whether it matters on this. I mean, it is
kind of feel
released,
like it
but
doesn't matter. I
yeah,
feel like the
okay,
only
yeah,
people who are listening to this are people who pretty much already know what happens in the death of
yeah.
Superman.
No, just the scene in Ace of Clubs, where he just takes off his glasses and goes and kind of like looks at her like kind of really like it was actually like that. There's a couple scenes and there's actually a bunch of I think that if you're a comic book fan, kind of I mean if you're a comic book fan in general, I think you'll enjoy this. But if you're a comic book fan, especially like I am, which is a comic book fan that has like a lot of problems with the not serious problems, but like kind of with the like really no one knows what Clark looks like and versus Superman with glass really, I mean like they make those jokes, they've made enough of those jokes, but like this was one like that scene where he just like takes off the glasses and just like really, and she goes oh, and then later on there's a joke be like you covered stories about yourself, this is so unethical. Like,
that was my favorite line. Actually, I have a note about that. I thought Rosario Dawson totally nailed that line or no, that wasn't Rosario Dawson, that was Rebecca Romaine. I thought Romaine totally nailed that line read. That was my favorite line in the movie, I think.
Yeah.
This is so unethical.
It's actually something that's always pissed me off about about Spider-Man, because it's like so long, so many people, like there's a ton of people that know who Spider-Man is and Peter Parker, and you go, wait, no, it's not even like, I don't know, like even there's a difference between, because basically the only thing that Spider-Man that Peter Parker covers is fucking Spider-Man. I know later on he gets into things, but like, during the classic, during the late 80s, 90s run that I read, it was like, I don't remember him ever covering another fucking thing other than Spider-Man's battles. And you're like, this is the most unethical, like as a photojournalist, like it kills me because, there's not that many photojournalist characters. Actually, there's a ton of photojournalist characters. What am I talking about? But but they all kind of suck.
Yeah.
Like it drives me nuts. Especially since one of them gets killed in Batman versus Superman for being a fucking CIA agent, which really bothers me. But I really genuinely love that scene.
Yeah.
So, but can we I don't know if you had any more with that, but can we talk about I don't remember. I mean, I don't even remember Luthor really at all in the Death of Superman.
No,
that
was a major change, and frankly, it's one that, in general, across the board in this movie, I didn't like.
Is he, because he's not? I don't remember Luthor as a dick, because I remember him as a criminal. He's a criminal. Yeah. He's a billionaire who I don't like in general, like billionaires, but like he's so many things. But he is just a dick. Like that's all that he kind of is in this film, like going into his lab where he's hired all these intelligent people supposedly, and he's just like, well, that's the whatever rock, you should have known that, I can't believe, and it's just like, wait, what?
Yeah, this is the current, like the modern day characterization of Lex. Like this is Jeff Johns really, really likes this kind of portrayal of Lex, and since he has kind of shaped so much of the last 10 years at DC, that's kind of a standard depiction. In the original comics, Lex was kind of in the middle of a story here where he had cancer from his kryptonite ring, and so he cloned himself a younger body and transplanted his brain into it because comics.
Yeah.
And faked his own death, and then basically took over his family fortune as his own son, who had like a full head of hair and a beard and an Australian accent.
Yeah.
And there's a wink and a nod to that in here when he's sneaking back in from going to the opera, and his disguise is that long like mane of red hair and the beard.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Lex actually looked like in the Death of Superman comics.
Oh.
But he was the way that he was depicted through most of the late 80s and early 90s comics, both as Lex and then later on as Lex Jr., was that he was always too smart to get caught. So he was always doing stuff, but he would mask it with like big public acts of charity, so that basically the general public consensus is that like Lex can't possibly be doing anything wrong because look at all the things he does for the community. Yeah. And so,
well, I mean,
yeah,
Mark Zuckerberg. Anyway, yeah, but yeah.
but in any event, the that's part of the thing is that like for me, I don't understand the need to make Luthor a major character in this story. Like Lex is a major character in basically every fucking story. And I don't know why we need to take a story where he was marginal and make his role bigger.
Yeah.
In Superman Doomsday, the first time they did this, rather than having Doomsday just wake up in his little underground box and slam his way out, they had a thing where LexCorp was tunneling to the center of the earth, and they found him and accidentally freed him.
Yeah.
And that kind of annoyed me, but like I got it. Like it was a practical way of just being like, oh, here's the reason. And then obviously in BVS, he like clones Doomsday using the corpse of General Zod. And I'm just like, I don't understand why everybody thinks Lex has to be involved with Doomsday. Like Doomsday is a incredibly straightforward concept. And I do go
ahead.
I do like some of the stuff that they did with Lex, but I don't like his intervention in the like third act, in the like where he dons the suit of armor and tries to fight Doomsday himself.
Yeah. I mean, I'm okay with the I mean, because I mean, clearly they're setting up a world here. But like I'm okay with Lex kind of in general and like what like his machinations are.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, like anyway. Sorry.
Kevin's machinations of Leonardo
will always be my, like, Alec Baldwin will always be my Lex Luthor, even though I don't, which is actually kind of surprising he hasn't done it, but
yeah, right.
I think he'd be a great voice for it. But I like what they're doing with it, and I like kind of the redemption of him, like basically redeeming himself and getting credit for it to some extent. But it was just like, it was just so over the top on his like, just I get his like weird, the weird obsession with Superman that he has. That's his character. Like that's, I don't think you can have that removed from him. But just being complete total dicks to everybody. It just bothered me so, because it was like, wow, that was just me. And then, I mean, they did do a good job, because every character that he said something mean to was just like, really? Like, I kind of had this, like, that was just uncalled for. Like, look, it wasn't like, oh, it wasn't subservience or anything like that, where like, there was just like, wow, he's a dick.
I will say, I think Lex is the only part in this movie that was really miscast. I didn't like Rainn Wilson as Lex. And part of it might honestly be that I just think he carries too much of Dwight Schrute with him.
Yeah.
To me, Lex, even when he was trying to be at his most menacing or condescending or whatever, Rainn Wilson's line reads and his affect, he just felt so like wormy and smarmy and petulant. I guess petulant is the big thing. Like, even when he's like talking about how all the things that he deserves and how Superman has robbed him of, like, he didn't sound like a guy who used to own this city and has been knocked off of a pedestal. He sounded like some spoiled rich kid who just thinks that the world owes him something.
Yeah.
And so to me, that was the one piece of casting I thought was a real miss for me. And rewatching Superman Doomsday for an article, most of the voices in that animated movie were not great. But I will say James Marsters was their Lex, and I thought that he absolutely nailed it. So it was really interesting kind of watching the two of them back to back.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, like, I have he's one of my few actors that I have I don't know why I hate him so much sort of thing. Like, it's not, I don't blame him. I blame me. Like those those actors, like you're just I don't know why I hate you so much, but like I do, I mean, like that's like 30% of my like hate for Patton Oswalt. Like I don't really understand why I hate you so much. I just do. Like I disliked him before I knew why I disliked him the rest of the 70% sort of thing. So like I think I found reasons to dislike him. But like Dwight, like I was Dwight. Like I think it's because I don't like his character so much I don't like his type of character at all. And it's not just the Dwight character. It's kind of any of those Napoleon Dynamite type characters and, who are just like, I don't know, like supposed to be like, I don't know if they're supposed to be on the spectrum, like they're playing some sort of like, oh, we're on the spectrum and thus we must find, I don't know what, what they're going for there other than, but because there's just so fucking many of them these days. But and I get it. I get why, because I mean, people fucking love these characters for some unknown reason. I don't get it. But like, I actually didn't know. I didn't actually make the connection that it was him. So the fact that I agree with you, like I'm just basically going a very roundabout going, wow, I'm actually surprised that I didn't notice the name or the voice, because I also agree with you that it wasn't a good match. It could have been. I mean, I have nothing against him, having a different role, but it just wasn't. His portrayal of it was basically like he's one of those actors that like I don't think I've seen a role where he's not either playing that or a meaner version of that, or I mean, like, which again, I mean, hey, it works for him. I mean, he's gotten a lot of roles and he does really well, and I mean, whatever. But it wasn't. It's such a curious casting choice. I mean, I guess maybe it was one of those, if you can get them, you get them, sort of things. But I just, I mean, because there's literally anyone I think would there's so many, any male actor might have been able to do a better role who wasn't him because of who he is. That makes sense.
I will say, just this seems like a good time to comment on some of the other casting. I really liked Rosario Dawson as Wonder Woman. I in general, I think she does good voice work. I've heard her do voice work a couple of other times, but she not only does she do a solid job, but also in terms of storytelling, because they went with the New 52 look and the kind of they've adopted elements of that continuity. They decided apparently that Superman and Wonder Woman had dated.
Yeah,
and it's like, if you have to address that objectively terrible idea of them dating, this is how to do it in that kind of self-deprecating, she's making fun of him kind of way. I also really liked the casting of Nathan Fillion for Green Lantern, which of course, like, he's done it before. This is not a new thing, but he doesn't always do it. And the thing that strikes me as really interesting is that because they used Fillion, immediately Hal tilts over into like cocky.
Yeah.
Like the first time they used him was for Green Lantern First Flight, which was the animated movie that came out to complement the Green Lantern theatrical movie.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because making Hal cocky in this movie and giving him that kind of like, oh, I'm with the Green Lantern Corps, it's going to be fine because I'm here. It feels very much like 90s Guy Gardner.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the hardcore warrior woman thing that they've put into Wonder Woman, who used to be a lot less aggressive and a lot less like God of War type around the time that this comic in particular was made. And so characterizing her in a more modern way and using Rosario for the role, it felt a little bit like Maxima, who actually was like this warrior princess from another planet who was in love with Superman at one point and blah, 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 and eventually like had to join the Justice League.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, like Bloodwind, who was in the Justice League at the time of Doomsday, actually was Martian Manhunter in disguise. And so basically Bloodwind's role was played by Bloodwind. And so it was just this interesting thing where it's like they used the big seven big guns Justice League instead of using the characters who were actually the Justice League in the comic.
Yeah.
but they tweaked the characters ever so slightly in such a way that the Big Seven Justice League felt like the Justice League from the Doomsday comics, which is actually, I thought it was a really interesting way of writing it, and I thought that the casting choices they made really helped bolster the way that they did that.
Yeah. I didn't even, I mean, it's weird. I didn't even connect. I mean, I'm familiar with Rosario Dawson and Nathan Fillion, and I didn't actually even make those connections. That's that's really weird. But yeah, no, I really dug. Like, I hope that they expand out Wonder Woman, because I like the way that she was portrayed on this. It's just slightly different enough from the movies that I it's not just like an adaptation sort of thing, which is cool. And obviously they give her enough of a, just with the back and forth with Superman and a couple of the other characters, they actually give her enough of a kind of a world that she existed outside of this film, and which is hopeful, because obviously they build. Obviously, the post-credit scenes or whatever, they're building, the reign of Superman up. But the one thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's like that they really, with these type of films, they don't usually make more than one with the same cast and same plot, right? Or have they
yes and no?
through?
It's interesting.
It seems like it's been all over the place, but I haven't been following.
I think because they make 4 of these a year now.
Yeah.
And so I think that what happens is that it's contingent on people's schedules.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of most of the major characters, they have basically 2 or 3 people who they'll turn to, depending on who's available and depending on the individual script. For the most part, they have like standalone movies, and then they have movies that exist within their continuity. And you can't really tell which one is which unless you look really hard.
Yeah.
Because the continuity is very loose. Most of the time, like Jason O'Mara, who plays Batman in this movie, has been playing Batman since 2005, or not 2005, since 2012, I think, when they did Justice League War, which is an adaptation of the first arc of the New 52.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that in any of the in-continuity Batman or Justice League movies since then that anybody else has played the role. Obviously, Kevin Conroy, who voiced Batman on Batman the Animated Series and on the Justice League show, has come back and done a couple of movies, but those movies were out of continuity, like The Killing Joke and some stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they do have like a semi-regular cast, but I do feel like there are certain characters who get recast pretty often. Going back to Flashpoint, which was officially the start of this kind of run of interconnected movies, because prior to that, there was really a point of just making it these are standalone.
Yeah.
Back when they did the Flashpoint paradox, they cast Michael B. Jordan as Cyborg, and then Michael B. Jordan blew up, and they pretty much immediately had to find Shamar Moore, who I think has been Cyborg in all of the movies that actually used Cyborg since then. I think they're probably setting up Rosario to be the star of... They're actually doing a Wonder Woman solo movie sometime in 2019. Like the 4 movies they have coming out next year is Batman Hush, Reign of the Supermen, some 4th thing I'm not going to remember, and then Wonder Woman in Bloodlines, I think, which is probably dealing with the same themes that the current, like the theatrical movie did, in terms of like introducing the idea that she's related to Zeus and all that kind of crap. Yeah. But there's been basically no announcements for any of the movies other than Reign of the Supermen, because Reign of the Supermen, it's like, well, we know who's going to be voicing a bunch of those characters because Hank Henshaw and John Henry Irons and the Eradicator-ish all made cameo appearances in this movie.
Yeah.
But like they haven't announced anything for Hush or for Wonder Woman yet, and so I'm assuming that probably Rosario is Wonder Woman, because it would make so much sense to have her be Wonder Woman in like a solo movie. But yeah, trying to think of what else. I have a lot of notes still left, and a lot of them are uh, just like, I want to just do like a whole row of nitpicks at the end of this, just so I can be like, these are the things that bugged me. Like, they probably aren't actually bad filmmaking, but they just bugged me.
Yeah.
But before we do that, I got a couple of things that I want to talk about. I do think that in the comics, the fight ended in front of the Daily Planet.
Yeah.
And I think that having it in the Hall of Justice instead of in front of the planet speaks to the Cal first Superman that they have in these movies, where Clark is kind of an afterthought and everything is all about the superheroics.
Yeah.
And I've talked a lot about the fact that that's not my vision of Superman. That's certainly not the Superman that existed in the Death of Superman storyline in the comics.
Yeah, no.
I do understand why in other media Cal first Superman is popular, because obviously it's difficult to find time for Clark stories.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's like a metaphor there for the fact that these movies are so wishy-washy about how they deal with Clark, and then this particular thing, the biggest moment of Superman's career, essentially happens in the Hall of Justice instead of in front of the Daily Planet.
Yeah, no, and I mean, especially considering, I mean, with this, I wish that they would have. In general, I don't like. In general, I don't like the love story shit because I don't know who it's speaking to. Like, I mean, like, I don't know if they're trying to be like, well, women like this and whatever, and like women that are watching comic book stuff aren't caring too much about this, you know, and like, so I never know who this is written for, other than just, well, this is what you write in films, and you have the man and the female, and they're interacting and they're having relationship problems, and that causes whatever, and it's just like, no, they're journalists. Have some journalist stuff that would cause issues or cause things and other conflict that you could have Clark be Clark and whatever. Because I mean, honestly, it just kind of weakens the superhero aspect of Superman when he's like, I don't know. I don't know how to talk to women's.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, you have one of the most amazing, powerful women, like human women, in this world, as your girlfriend, and I don't believe you would have gotten Lois Lane as a girlfriend if you were like, I don't know how to talk to the women. You know, I mean,
yeah.
I also, again, like I said before, I'm like, I also just don't believe that Superman, Clark Kent doesn't know how to talk to women.
Yeah.
You know, so, but
yeah. No, I don't disagree with that. I also think that having Lois, like the Lois element at the end, there's some good stuff and some bad stuff all mixed up. I love Lois throwing the rocks at Doomsday as an act of defiance when everything seems hopeless.
Yeah.
But I hate the way that it was framed, where after like 2 rocks, she just gives up and stands there like it's suicide.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's what the writing meant to imply. I think it was just a miscommunication of the.
I think it was a depth issue, because it looked like he was. Doomsday was either closer to her than he actually was, because it also, like, the one note I have from that, now that I actually understand what the note was about, because literally the note was just I think something like, she would have died, or it was that the blast of that punch probably would have killed her. That's what I was talking about, like that scene, because I was like, I know what he's going to do, and I know what running move and what, you know, how he's going to do things. And like, she gets blown back and huge stones are being blown back. And you're like, no, I get her. Like, it's a great scene, but like, just literally the animation, not even the animation, just the depth on it is wrong. Like, she should have been like 200 feet back, basically, because, you know, if she's that close to Doomsday, I mean, basically she's dead. Not because just being in a vicinity of him is deadly, but because Superman has to punch him or attack him with enough force to cause a shockwave, and
yeah,
I don't know, but that's kind of a continual thing in this. Like she gets blown back, or or Jimmy gets blown back so many fucking times that like that I mean, it's one of those problems when you read too much about what actual explosions do to people. And then those things in movies stop being fun because you're like, yeah, no, you can be wearing a bulletproof vest or whatever, but your organs still don't. Yeah. Anyway.
I do like the tweak to Doomsday's cause of death, just because by doing it the way they did instead of just having them, because it played to the strength of film to me. Because when you're doing this final issue that's all splash pages, the way that they structured the fight and the idea of the two kind of colliding together at the end makes sense, because it's a very intimate shot. In live action, I don't think that would have looked as good. Or in motion, I don't think that would have looked as good. And so I do like the tweak to Doomsday's cause of death. Comic book nerds will probably point out that it doesn't make any sense because Doomsday doesn't actually have bones. So you can't snap his neck like that. But I also I will say I do not like the addition of the BVS spear claw, and I do not like the addition of heat vision on Doomsday. Like, this is a thing that they've been doing in the comics and that they've been doing in the movies and everything else. And I get that, like, okay, he's Kryptonian, so we're going to give him heat vision. But like, Doomsday is already formidable enough without the heat vision, and giving it like that was one of the things that Superman was able to do in the first fight that made a real dent. And also, I do feel like it's a weird choice because they debut it really early in the movie, and then Doomsday doesn't use it again. Like, he uses it that one time, and then he doesn't use it again for a really long time. And then the next time we see it is during Lex's intervention, when it looks like Lex might actually get the upper hand, and then Doomsday heat visions him. And all I could think was that's 5 minutes from the end of the movie. It's in a really like big action scene. Like, if you're gonna have heat vision Doomsday, debuting it there would have been really cool. Debuting it where they did earlier in the movie just felt pointless, because it's a thing that I didn't like already, and then like they introduce it and they do nothing with it for an hour.
And it would also at least feed to because I mean his the bones grow, and he certainly kind of has that I'm trying to remember whether it was as much that way in the comics originally, but in the movie, basically the more that the problem is the more they blast him with things, he gets bigger, and whatever. It's that sort of thing. So there's like a little. If it would have been better if there was a little bit of that. My big problem with the Doomsday is that he literally never looked like he was being beaten, until literally the end. Even in the movie, he was like staggering, struggling, and like Diana's rope or lasso holds up to him and is clearly doing something, is struggling with him, and so like, and the fact that Soups is so beaten down at the end that that scene when Lois is standing there is literally pure desperation, and he has that one punch. If it doesn't work, then everything is lost. It definitely builds to that, and he's just standing there like it was an hour ago in the movie, and like, oh, it's just like, I took on the bear, and that was fine, and that really got me. No, but it's like, because that was something I was kind of looking for. Like, there's no, like, I distinctly remember. Like, gonna have to go back and look, but I mean, like, I distinctly remember, Doomsday towards the end has been beaten a little bit, at least.
I know what you mean.
It's not like he's, oh well, clearly just one more punch, it's like you can just push him over like a feather, but he has been affected. In this, it doesn't look like he's been affected at all. And Superman is basically like, he's done, I mean, I think Lex could take him out with a punch,
which is funny because it's one of those things that they did really well in the comics. They really did have Doomsday be basically invincible up until until Superman 75. And then in Superman 75, like he really pours on some heat vision at one point, and he finally manages to break one of the like bony protrusions that sticks out of Doomsday, and like when he breaks it, that hurts him.
Yeah.
And then like that's like the moment that the tide turns and Superman's like, wait, okay, he's actually hurt now.
Yeah, and I think that was the thing, is that literally they would have just been like one of the bones would have been broken or something like that, and a punch or something. But like, I mean, it was literally like Superman seemed to have just as much effect as Wonder Woman or Guy had, or not Guy, or is that, yeah, it's Hal. Hal had. And, I mean, and Superman is Superman, especially in this storyline, even more so than any other storyline. Superman is the different, I mean,
yeah.
like, and that was like kind of like, that was one of those things where like, I give this like an 85 out of 100. Like that would have been like that. I would have given like a mid 90s. It would have made an A if it just literally been like. Because I never like that in whether it be in comics or whether it be in movies or whatever, where, well, they're not beating this guy at all in any way, shape, and form. Oh, but the love punch, which always has to happen. It's like inspired by the love of some other person.
I mean, it worked in Back to the Future.
True. But it's just irritating. It's
I know.
Like I don't think that they meant it. Like too, it's just like there's no implication there that they meant that. I mean, this is I think for me, this is getting into it's at least on the edge of nitpicking.
Yeah, I mean,
because again, it's
there's a lot of things I think
they do portray. He starts in the full body costume thing. I don't know what it's called, but in his what's that?
His like containment suit.
Yeah, his containment suit.
Which I hate.
Slowly tears away, but
I hate like the weird New Gods look of it, where it's like it's got unnecessary details all over the place and all that kind of. I like that they use the green suit. I kind of don't like the design for the green suit. Just it's ugly. And in the comics, it was boring, but it wasn't ugly.
Yeah.
I also kind of wish, like, if you're going to do the containment suit, I feel like not going with the hands tied Doomsday thing is a missed opportunity. Yeah. Where it's like they had the thing where he had one hand behind his back for the first third of the story or whatever, and then they have that like moment where the Justice League teams up and all blasts him with the best of their, and all they do is knock his other hand free.
Yeah.
It's just such a cool beat. And I feel like every now and again you look at these things and you're like, how did you not just adapt that beat? Like it wouldn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
Similarly,
it does feel like sometimes, and I'm curious on whether they might do it purposely, whether with these adaptions, whether you read it once and then you decide specifically not to adapt certain thing and be like, no, I want to do that, which again totally respect. And one of the problems with being like this being for both of us obviously like one of the defining storylines of our enjoyment of any entertainment whatsoever, but specifically comic books, it's hard to separate it from that. It'd be interesting to talk to the writers and the director and be like, was that a conscious choice to not do that, or did you just forget about it? Like what was the decision making there? Because I completely and totally respect people not sticking with the original source material, because you do want to make it your own. Otherwise it's like, well, why don't we just let J.K. Rowling direct the films and we can just make Harry Potter that way.
Yeah, and again, like for me it's mostly just a matter of I'm always confused when it's like that was a really like, or the big thing which I've talked about before, but the visual that they had in the months leading up to Doomsday of Doomsday's arm slamming against the wall as he tries to break out, and then finally just before the story starts he punches through the wall and breaks free. I was always like, man, that's like it's in a comic, but it's done in such a cinematic way. I'm shocked nobody's ever done it. And then they finally did it in Krypton. But
I haven't seen that part yet, but I'm way behind on that.
But the okay, so let's see, what was the other thing? Oh, the other thing I was going to say in terms of missed opportunities like that is when you relocate from the Daily Planet to the Hall of Justice, for whatever reason that they did it, they missed the opportunity to do anything cool with the Hall of Justice in terms of like give them a better, like if you're going to go to the Hall of Justice where like the Justice League trophy room is, give them a better background than the front lawn.
Yeah.
Like I feel like what was the point of relocating the fight to a visually interesting place and then literally just having them fight in the grass anyway?
Budget, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. But then it like again, it just begs the question, like, in that case, why did you bother relocating? Because you could have stayed in the city, which you've been doing for the whole movie, and just reused some of the animation.
Yeah.
But
and literally, I mean, one of those things is just like, and literally, I think the more and more we talk about it, the more and more I think that that the people must have purposely chose to do different things.
Oh, it's very possible.
No, I mean, not just like, oh, I think that this is a better idea. It's like, no, we're not going to do, because I mean, also, I mean, like they certainly, I mean, they have the flat, they have the Superman cape image, the iconic image, and but it's not 100%, and it's not like Supes is there and Lois isn't in the same thing. I mean, personally, obviously, if it was probably either of us, we would literally have just been like, okay, Dan, so you want to write the script for this?
Yeah.
and we'll just copy the frames as was drawn. Which I'd still love to see. But I mean, like personally, I would have, you end with that scene.
Yeah.
That iconic image. I mean, I don't even know if I'd jump to the funeral. At all, because I feel like that's a different film. I mean, to me, it's another comic. It's another book.
Yeah, I suspect that what it is that the Reign of the Superman is going to be more densely packed than this one, so they needed to get through elements of Funeral for a Friend so that they could set up what they're doing next.
Oh yeah.
I will say, talking about things that were changed, the things that the writers changed on purpose. The other major point I wanted to talk about before I just go down my list little nitpicks is the president at the funeral. Yeah. And they have a fake president, which is interesting mostly because in the original comics, the eulogy was delivered by Bill and Hillary Clinton. And at the time these comics were written, the Clintons were not yet elected or inaugurated. But the feeling on the part of Louise Simonson and John Bogdanov, who were doing Superman, the Man of Steel at the time, is that the Clintons represented hope for the future, getting us out of 12 years of Reaganomics.
Yeah.
And so it strikes me as a very intentional decision.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you weren't going to do it with the Clintons because the movie's not set in the 90s.
Yeah.
But it strikes me as a very interesting decision to intentionally go with a fake president, because obviously there's no universe where Donald Trump stands for hope in anything.
Yeah.
So that was a thing that I liked, and it was just such it felt to me like an obviously kind of intentional and possibly even subversive change that I really dug it.
Wow, I totally forgot that. Wow. I just totally forgot that it was actually Bill Clinton. Yeah, and it was it was a white dude, wasn't it?
No, it was a black guy, but he was
not Obama.
Yeah, specifically not Obama. He had a shaven head and a goatee.
Oh, okay. I was just mixing up with the mayor early in the film.
Yeah.
Which is nice to have basically all the politicians in the film be African Americans, but.
But yeah, let me. Unless you have any final thoughts, I'll run down some kind of fun things that.
Oh no! Go for it. Go for it.
Okay, so throughout the course of this movie, they incorporated various elements. When Ugly Mannheim and the Inner Gang folks had their stuff taken away from them, they bring it to Star Labs, and John Henry Irons is there. And just before the meteorite strikes, you're up there at the USS Excalibur, and the crew of the Excalibur gets torn out by the asteroid. And you see Jor-El as like his hologram self, announcing essentially that he's going to be there to protect the sanctity of Kryptonian life or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I really like the idea of incorporating Doomsday's origin into Hank Henshaw's and Jor-El into the Eradicator, and introducing John Henry Irons here. Because in terms of storytelling economy, it's really clever. Like, you don't have time in an 85-minute movie to go back and explain where these properties came from. And so making minor but sensible tweaks to them so that the movie works, I really like. I do, like, the purist in me is annoyed just by the fact that I love Adventures of Superman 466, which is the story where the Excalibur crashes and Hank Henshaw essentially dies for the first time before he comes back as the cyborg.
Yeah.
And I would love to see one of these animated movies just do Adventures 466 and just do, like, okay, we're going to do essentially this horrible riff on Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Let me think. I liked, as a connoisseur of 90s Superman, I liked seeing characters who were so key to the Superman mythology at the time. Kitty Faulkner was in this. Dabney Donovan's in it. John Henry Irons, Cat Grant. I like the fact that they reinvented Cat Grant as a black woman, because why not? Yeah. Like, you really don't need her to be anything.
I don't know. Some people on the internet say.
Oh, yeah, right? All those Cat Grant fans who obviously cared about her before this movie came out.
Yeah, and are very, very angry that now she's anyway.
Yeah. But the big, like, I liked the there was a reference to Superman the movie in this, where Superman starts to totter by the chopper and Lois holds him up and says, "I've got you," and he goes, "But who's got you?"
Yeah,
which is from when he saves the helicopter in Superman the movie.
Oh, sure.
But the big thing. Oh, and I do like the fact that they used personal electronics, which didn't exist in 1992 in the way that they do now, to condense basically Funeral for a Friend into this like 30-second montage at the end of the movie. I thought that was a cool use of it. I also think that instead of having the giant superhero funeral cortege, using quote unquote real heroes and having the pallbearers be like firefighters and military and cops or whatever it was, it's like, okay, good. Like, I liked the music that they had in this movie because it was very evocative of the Justice League and Justice League United cartoons, which was something that very much like in the Justice League movie, where you use the Williams fanfare to reintroduce Superman, and it's really emotionally effective because people have a connection to it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it actually was the Justice League music or if it was just evocative of it, but using that very familiar music brings people to an emotional and a visceral place that you can't with the kind of generic scoring that they did in Superman Doomsday.
Yeah.
And then the last like nitpick that I want to bring up, because this one feels more like a continuity thing than like all these other little observations are just little observations. They're very personal to me. Yeah. In the comics, because of the fact that they had like the Justice League of C-listers, there's always been people who object and are like, well, what the hell was Batman doing during the whole Doomsday fight? Why wasn't he there? What was Wonder Woman doing? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it never really bothered me because it's like, it's a bunch of C-listers and the whole fight took place over the course of maybe a couple of hours, and like most people wouldn't have been able to get there and whatever.
Yeah.
However, in this movie, I actually kind of have a beef because you have a speedster. So Flash could have gotten anyone there.
Yeah.
Like Flash could have run to the Fortress of Solitude and gotten a Phantom Zone projector so they could just get rid of Doomsday altogether. You have Batman there, who has his whole like family of allies who are well established in this movie. In fact, Robin is in this movie.
Yeah.
You have Wonder Woman, who has the Amazons, and Aquaman, who has the Atlantean army, which we saw in this movie, and we saw him commanding them.
Yeah.
And then you have Hal Jordan, who makes a big deal about how he's a member of the Green Lantern Corps rather than just being Green Lantern, which implies that he could have summoned other Green Lanterns to come help this essentially walking, talking extinction level event. And so it's this weird thing where I'm like, when it was the like shitty bargain bin Justice League and everybody's like, well, what was Batman doing the whole time? I didn't really care. Like it didn't. But like now watching it with Batman and Wonder Woman and Aquaman and Green Lantern, I'm just like, wait, all of these people have armies to call on.
Yeah.
Why are we alone?
Yeah. And literally only I think Wonder Woman was kind of knocked out, right? She was relatively kind of out of it, at least right off the bat. But everyone else, like, I don't remember, like Batman was I think probably knocked up, but he wasn't like destroyed. The Flash, I don't remember. He was punched really hard, but
they everybody got tossed through buildings pretty much. The one who was really fucked up was, well, Wonder Woman basically has a concussion because she was the one who like Doomsday just pounded on her while she was unconscious for a while.
Yeah.
But the one who was really messed up was Cyborg, who Doomsday essentially pulled apart. Yeah. And I think actually that was the thing, is that in order to save Cyborg's life, Batman had to take him back to Star Labs.
Yeah.
Which is actually, again, kind of a wink and a nod to stuff from the comics where Maxima got a concussion at one point and had to be out of the fight. And Blue Beetle was so badly injured that Ice had to leave the fight in order to bring Blue Beetle to a hospital. Otherwise, he wasn't going to make it.
Yeah.
So I feel like what they did is they tried to use the framework of the Doomsday story and some of the things with the Justice League of Also Rans to inspire what they could do in this, to answer some of the questions of like, well, how come, why wouldn't the Big Seven Justice League do better? And in general, like the fan in me would rather have seen like the quote unquote real Justice League from this story.
Yeah.
But I understand, like, you would have had to spend time introducing these 6 characters that nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah.
And whereas, because this is a shared continuity and there's been like 3 or 4 Justice League movies in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
There's a Justice League. Just fucking use it.
Yeah.
But so I do, it's that weird thing of, I kind of like the way that they incorporated elements of the original Doomsday story and just kind of tweaked who was involved to accommodate the needs of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think that the one and only place where my suspension of disbelief fails is that all these people who have like armies at their disposal never call anybody except Superman for help.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty much on board with you. I'd give it like probably not quite an 85, like 80 maybe. It was definitely much better than I expected it to be. I always go into these things with relatively low expectations.
I'm trying to remember which one I first saw, and this was like a while back. And it was just not good at all.
a lot of the early ones were not great because they were really struggling to find how to do, like, they wanted to do these big epic stories and they were always struggling how to do them in 70 minutes. That's another thing, is that I don't know if in general they have expanded, or if it's this movie in particular, but the fact that this had an 85-minute runtime really helped it. Because all of the things that they were kind of sticking in there and all these little like divergences and digressions and Easter eggs and things didn't feel like a waste of time, because the movie was 15 minutes longer than like most of these things are.
Yeah. No, that certainly helps.
But yeah, so I always go into these things with pretty low expectations. A lot of the time I find myself pleasantly surprised because I usually don't read the ones that that aren't based on a comic I actually care about. Or watch the ones, excuse me. Like a lot of these I'll watch just enough of it to get a sense for it for work, but I won't actually, like, I won't do a review because it's like, oh, I watched half an hour of this so I could prep for an interview.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so I would say if you like comics, you're going to enjoy this, provided you don't want it to be super true to the. Yeah. Predictably in the comments threads on articles I've been writing this week, there's all kinds of people who are just like, I can't believe that they changed the Justice League, and I'm just sitting here going, there are hills to die on, and then there's just not, and I don't understand, and it also, a lot of the time it comes back to this thing of like, when people had a shit fit because like the Fantastic Four, where the Human Torch was black in the Fantastic Four. I'm sitting here going, Fantastic Four was a book that was selling like 20,000 copies at the time. I saw way more than 20,000 people bitching and moaning about it on the internet. So at some point it's just like, you don't care about this character. You couldn't tell me 5 things about this character. Shut up. And I kind of feel that way about like the people. There's most of the nitpicks where people are like, oh, but it needs to be X, Y, and Z. And I'm just like, no, it doesn't. Like, this is my favorite comic. I've read this probably 200 times. Yeah. And I can understand that it's a fucking movie and some things need to change.
Yeah. Or just it's a comic book and things have changed. I mean, like there's a ton of, what it's also, it's a comic book. Like, it's literally in a surreal world where different dimensions exist and things like that. I mean, like, just take a breather. And as we have said on almost every single comic book movie we've ever fucking reviewed, just wait a couple years. You'll probably get what you wanted.
Yeah.
or if you're angry because it isn't exactly like the film that is out that you liked, you already got what you wanted.
Yeah.
You like the Superman of the 80s. Hey, guess what? You got what, 4 films? I like the Superman that's around right now, and I've only gotten, well, I guess 3. I don't really like to talk about the last one.
It's really like 1.5 when you consider it.
Yeah, I
know. He didn't really get featured that heavily in BVS or Justice League. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thanks for listening to the Emerald City Video Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at ECV_podcast. You can follow Zach at ZD Roberts or me at Russ Burlingame. Yep. And you can find all of those things on Facebook and Instagram.
On Instagram.
So you should do that. Rate, review, like, share, subscribe to the show. If you want to support the show, you can become a patron of the Emerald City Video Podcast at Patreon or at emeraldcityvideo.podbean.com/patron. And we've got some cool stuff coming up for people who back the show.
Yes, we do.
And then that's really it for tonight. I hope that you enjoyed the episode. Check out the movie because it is worth watching for, I would say, 80% of our audience.
Yeah.
And remember to check back here by noon on the 5th day, and we'll have more for you soon.
Cool.